sometimes the ending you get doesn't match the energy or the love in which you put in. And I think closure is a big topic for me because not only is it something I feel like I struggle with a little bit today, but I feel like it was one thing that really held me back and affected me in my past. And oftentimes I think we have a hard time letting go or always seeking out closure because we don't care to start over. Start over with new relationships, start over with new, trying to find new friends, trying to build new connections, having to go out on our own, having to heal ourselves, having to do internal self-reflection and self-improvement and the whole journey that comes with having to face the reality of our life. Sometimes we're trying so hard to not even look for closure, but really just look for another opportunity to try and, see how you're valuable or prove how you could be valuable to other people, another opportunity to have a conversation to provide clarity or get clarity for yourself. And it all gives you this continuous endless loop of holding on to hope that you could fix your past and keep it here. Keep the people that have always been around. Keep the person that finally took a chance on you. Keep the person that you finally got that love from that you sought out for so long. And you're really just trying to avoid the reality of who they are so that, again, you don't have to start over and have to move forward in life and figure out really what life looks like without them. Sometimes I notice that closure is this thing where we are constantly contemplating or we're constantly trying to bargain with ourselves, like, that this ending can't be how it ends, that it can't end with all these questions, it can't end this hard, it can't end this painful. There's no way this is just the end of our story. There's no way that this is just the end of our relationship. And again, sometimes our energy and effort in which we put in doesn't match the ending that we get, because for some of y'all had put in a true amount of love, you had put in a good amount of effort and energy and time into people, and sometimes it all ends suddenly to where it's like there's no questions answered, there's no explanation, there's no clarity. It's just this flatline, harsh ending that doesn't really match or really provide you any type of reason as to why it happened. And that can leave you very hurt. That can leave you in a place where you're questioning yourself at times. And I think that's another big thing, that we oftentimes are looking for clarity in order to almost validate our own worth and that we ever mattered at all. Because it can be easy for when things harshly end, or it seems like somebody gives up on us, or they don't put in the amount of energy or effort that we were willing to put in, that we never mattered to them at all, or that it never mattered to, or that the situation as a whole never really mattered to them, or that it didn't affect them, and that they aren't hurting as much as we're hurting, or that, they don't think about us as much as we're thinking about them. And I think the big thing to be able to take away from that is that closure isn't always guaranteed. We're not always guaranteed to get that explanation. We're not always guaranteed to get those questions answers. We aren't always guaranteed to get that opportunity to explain ourselves and possibly give clarity. And I think the big part of that is that we have to learn how to be able to find peace with that. We have to learn to be able to understand that somebody else's decisions, somebody else's emotional immaturity to not be able to communicate their feelings, or somebody's just fear and, sudden decision to run and, not give you a proper ending is sometimes something that you have to come to peace with, sometimes something that you have to come to terms with. Because although, you may not get an answer to your questions, sometimes not getting an answer to those questions has to be the answer to your questions and the reality of the situation. Because sometimes the reality of who people are is the reality of the situation, and it telling you that it wasn't a person for you, or it telling you that that situation served its purpose, or it's no longer meant for you. And that's why I often feel like it's so important not to attach your worth to other people's opinions or how other people treat you and stuff like that, because people are going to leave, come and go in our life. I think people are going to continuously make decisions and choices towards us that we don't ever fully truly understand. Sometimes we don't fully understand why somebody didn't have feelings for us. Sometimes we don't fully understand why people think of us in a certain way or why they perceive us in a certain way. But I know that we can't live our whole life constantly needing to explain ourselves, constantly trying to understand how other people understand us, because that's just gonna leave us never at peace. We're always gonna be trying to go out of our way to get answers from people that we aren't ever guaranteed to truly get, or that they're not even obligated to give us. And I think for myself, I had to start looking at what is it costing me to be able to even get that closure, because sometimes just the process of trying to get a conversation, just the process of trying to reach out to people and truly understand them can be a draining process in itself. Because some people aren't, you have to understand, like, some people aren't even in the emotional maturity space. Some people aren't even there emotionally, or comfortable with their own emotions, or comfortable with certain conversations to be able to even give you answers to the questions in which you're asking. Because I feel like sometimes people don't even know the answer to those questions themselves. All they know is their feeling. All they know is what their heart is telling them. Sometimes their heart, their ego is telling them to run away from a situation, to give up on somebody, to run away from this pain that they might feel, and to run away from this discomfort that they might be feeling. Or maybe they don't even have the words to truly explain how they feel. And I feel like you have to become at peace with that, because you won't fully understand it all the time. And some people, again, won't be able to give you a answer to those questions. And so it's like, do we go our whole life always needing that clarity, always needing that closure? Or do we learn to provide it to ourselves and understand that this doesn't necessarily have to mean something about me? And even if it does, I may not get an explanation as to what I ever did wrong. Sometimes I just have to reflect on it on myself, reflect on certain situations myself, and just ask myself, how can I be better moving forward with the information that I do have? Because sometimes people will never tell you where you messed up. Sometimes people will never explain to you how you hurt them. Sometimes people will never ask you the questions about you that they questioned about you. Sometimes people question certain things about you, or they'll make certain assumptions about you before they actually put in the effort to reach out and ask for the clarity themselves. And so it's like, you got to become at peace with that, because those conversations are always guaranteed to happen. And I'll be the last person to say like, oh, that's an easy thing to let go of, but it's not going to hurt, because it truly sometimes will. But I think of my own story, I feel like I always used to go after closure because I always wondered, is there something more here? Is there just a conversation that needs to be had before I let go? Is there, something they're misunderstanding about me? And I noticed that holding on to that hope, holding on to the hope of having that conversation, holding on to the hope of, somebody possibly finally coming to their senses, somebody finally putting their ego and their pride aside again, would keep me stuck holding on to a past instead of being able to move forward. And to be honest, I would say I was afraid to move forward because I was afraid to rebuild certain relationships. I was afraid to go out and have to meet new people. I was afraid to figure out how I could be that old version of myself that I might have been with that person with new people. And, although it can be scary, I think you have to recognize it's not worth the peace, or it's not worth the chaos that it takes to try and get those conversations out of certain people. Because again, you can't force people to show up in a way that they don't know how to show up in, or that they don't have the capacity to show up in, because some people just simply aren't at that place of comfort to where they can have certain conversations, or they can have that level of emotional maturity to even be able to express exactly why they made certain decisions in which they made. Or some people, again, have an ego and a pride thing to where they aren't willing to set those things aside and actually be vulnerable enough and mature enough to give you the closure that you possibly deserve, but they're never obligated to actually give. I know some of y'all are probably sitting here, you're like, well, how do I find peace, or how do I get that acceptance? I think you have to first question, like, what part of myself needs closure? Because oftentimes we're seeking out closure because we're allowing that non-closure to essentially mean something about ourselves. It's making us question something about who we are and maybe the worth that we hold. I feel like oftentimes we go after closure because we want answers to questions to stop the spiraling questions that we hold about ourselves without it. Like, am I good enough? Was I worth it? Did you ever care? Was I ever loved? Did I not deserve you? Things like that we might have questions about. We have to ask ourselves, why does that person even have the power to answer those questions and determine how we feel about ourselves? And I think that's where you start finding a piece of closure, understanding that even though this person made this decision about me, this doesn't determine whether I'm lovable, whether I'm good enough, whether I hold any type of value or worth, whether I am deserving of being in certain people's lives, whether I'm a good person. Whatever questions you might be asking yourself, I think when you develop a relationship with yourself and you understand your own self-worth as a person and the value that you hold as a person, then you won't even allow that situation to make you ask those questions. But I oftentimes, again, feel like sometimes we can constantly want to hold on to the past because of, you know, what it was guaranteed, or we know what it can provide to us, whether that's a feeling, whether that's a version of our allowing us to be a version of ourselves that we were never allowed to be before. And so it's all about recognizing that, you know, I'm capable of moving forward. I'm capable of building something new, that I don't need an explanation. I don't need closure to know that this thing that I had in the past, you know, I'm not capable of moving forward without it. Because oftentimes I feel like we overlook our own strength as people and our ability to truly move forward with just ourselves. And you know, be able to rebuild certain relationships, to be able to, you know, rebuild connections with people, to be able to get back to a place in life where we are at peace without the people that, you know, we're always in it at a point in time. And I think we also overlook our power in being able to go through a process of healing, or being able to handle a certain amount of pain. And although, yes, it will be uncomfortable, it will be much worth it, because it won't be costing you the peace that it costs you in order to constantly be holding on to hope, or constantly thinking that you need closure from people who, again, aren't ever guaranteed to give it to you. So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes you get an ending to a story that doesn't completely make sense. It's not the one that you fully deserve, and it doesn't match the effort in which you put in. Because I think oftentimes we see it as, I would never do that to you. I would never treat you in that way. I would have given you that closure. I would have explained myself. But I think true closure is just coming to acceptance that people don't owe you anything. But people not giving you what you necessarily deserve doesn't always have to mean something about your own self-worth. And I feel like if you really look internally to say, what do I need closure to validate within me, then that's where you could start healing yourself and really starting to accept the situation and the person for who they are. You know, I appreciate and love you guys for making it to the end of the video. I hope you learned a thing or two. Catch you guys in the next video. Peace.